thanks so much for your patience. Welcome back to Launch for semester 2. We have a new team here. Would you folks like to introduce yourselves and sort of like give a brief what you're up to?
Hi, I'm Kat.
I'm Anna B.
I'm Chloe.
And we sort of have like a very nebulous idea about like a startup that would try to get young people more involved in local politics.
Awesome. So cool. Wow. That's awesome. Anyway, thanks. Quick note on all of you all that did great. One quick note. A lot of you guys were you were talking about your to-dos, and a lot of you were talking to customers and just talking to prospective people. You all did fantastic jobs. I love the hustle on like going door to door and asking people things, but I wanted to give you two like quick little pieces of advice. One, when you're asking people questions about your venture, don't ask them, hey, would you like to have an all-in-one solution that does your laundry for you, for instance? Because like the obvious answer is like yes, or like, yeah, that would be cool to have, but that's not helpful to you in your like construction of your venture. So you always want to ask open-ended, non-leading questions. So nothing like, would this be nice? Would this be bad? Is this a bad part of your experience? Don't ever ask those types of questions. Like, don't be a lawyer. Like, just ask them open-ended, clear questions. And then you want to ask customers about their specific experiences. So I was talking with, I'm just going to pick on y'all for a second about the, you're doing the direct-to-consumer sports equipment gear, which is awesome. But the parent of a basketball player has a very different experience than the parent of a lacrosse player. So you don't want to ask the parent of the lacrosse player what the parent of the basketball player might think. People are really bad at thinking for other people. So what you want to do is try and ask something that's only tailored to their specific experience. So and get to know them on just their experience. This is also important because when you're asking someone about what the parents of certain sports might do, you don't ask the child. They have a very different experience than what their parent is going through, and they don't have the same sets of needs and pain points. So a lot of you have kind of like parallels of those types of situations. And then you want to let them do the talking. Like, your time with the customer is not a time for you to share your ideas, it's a time for you to get ideas from your customers, which is really important, and getting all sort of like the shareholder input on that. And the other point that I wanted to just stress before you all spend a ton of time looking for people to talk to, I got a lot of questions about how would I get people to respond to my surveys and things like that. That's kind of an entrepreneurial challenge in and of itself. You need to know your target demographic, think about who needs to answer the questions that you have for you to make progress, and then seek them out in like the most possible efficient way. So let's see, so the group working on the smart mirror, for instance, going door to door, asking every person in like a given city whether they would like a smart mirror that helps them with mental well-being is probably not the most efficient way of getting to talk to people who would actually buy your product. By far the majority of them won't buy a mirror, they couldn't imagine spending more money on a mirror than what's absolutely necessary, things like that. That doesn't mean your idea doesn't have a market, it just means that you haven't found it yet. So what you could look into is people who are interested in like mental well-being, like go to a yoga class maybe, that would be one step closer. Go talk to a psychologist or psychiatrist and ask if you could maybe pass out flyers in their waiting room, for instance, if people would be interested in that. Or talk to a high school guidance counselor, or all sorts of ways to get closer to the actual issue that you're addressing and make it a little bit more efficient. Google Forms are all that you need to get as far as you want. Do long-form phone calls, do long-form in-person discussions. Those are always the most helpful. When I would do it for Verb, we would literally just sit on the phone with someone and they would say something and I would just keep writing and would never interrupt them and try and just keep the thought flow going. Anyway, any quick questions on the customer interview parts? I just wanted to save effort on that point because I saw it. Yeah.
How did Verb figure out how to target their audience?
That's a great question because we switched a lot. So initially we thought that our target customer was college student, and we knew college students really well. We talked to them every day, and that gave us our first leg up right then. But that's not who our customer is today. Our customer is generally like 25 to 34, like athletic young professional is like sort of more who we're targeting. And so now we seek it out. The nice thing is we have enough customers to now use them as our pool. So now we just interview our current customers to get to know their mindsets more. But unfortunately, you all don't really have customers at this point. But so you need to just seek out who your prospective customers might be.
Yeah. So like quick follow-up on that. So did you change the value proposition like through the course of like launching or?
kind of. That's a good question. We didn't change the fundamental value proposition, but we changed how we were delivering it. So initially we thought that we were going to seek like distribution on college campuses, for instance, and now we're all online, direct to consumer. So which might be a similar thing that you're looking at, because I would imagine your target market is not going to be like rec league, basketball, and lacrosse programs, because your price point's going to probably be too low. Your target's going to probably be like AAU and travel sports, like crowds, who's willing to invest more in their sports. Does that make sense? Yeah. That might be a comparable example for you all. Any other questions on this? I didn't want to waste much time on that. Yeah.
How do you know when to stop switching target audience?
It's kind of a gut decision. A lot of research, and I think that you should test wherever you get more traction, like follow where it's easiest. If you feel like you're trying to force people to get something that they don't really want or they don't really love, you're probably not talking to the right person. Remember, it kind of goes back to our discussion of you want to find the people who, the small group of people that absolutely love your product is way more valuable than the large group of people who like your product. So you really want to seek out the people who absolutely love it. When you get the response of, oh my God, I've been looking for this, that's the type of person you want to talk to. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. Anyway, I didn't want to spend a lot of time talking about that. Okay, cool. Just a reminder on the upcoming Yale deadlines. Spring Accelerator is due on the 16th, so that's in 2 days. You have time, it's on midnight on the 16th. It's a short application. If you want to do it, some of you have sent me applications, and I think I've given feedback on a couple, but send me them and I can have you give feedback. Yeah.
I can also read them. I did
Yes.
this for Accelerator last year, so if you have any questions about it or want me to like read apps, I'm totally happy to do that.
Yeah. We want to make sure that Launch has a really strong presence in the size of the Accelerator. Rick Hunt was actually talking with me the other day. He's the judge for Launch that we had the other day, and he said that a lot of things are shifting around. I don't know if I recorded. A lot of things are shifting around.
I'll edit it out.
In
Yeah.
Size City, and like Launch might be eventually like kind of the main game in town, was what he said. So like we really need to keep up what we're building here, and we'll start to see that we're kind of dominating the city programming, which is good. In a good way, We're not kicking out people, we're just adding more people. And then the CEID Summer Fellowship is the next one on the 25th. So anyone who's building anything that has to do with engineering, so yours would be really good for that. For instance, for the seed, they're really interested in anything that's workshop related. And then the Summer Fellowship, which I emailed out details on the app, is due February 8th. There was also an info session a while ago. I don't know if anyone went to it, but that's a really great opportunity. Did anyone here participate in Summer Fellowship in the past? No. Okay, so then I'll talk. They changed a lot since I did it, so I think it's a really fantastic experience.
Also, if you're looking at applying to see Summer Fellowship, I know Joe and Larry pretty well and like what they're looking for, so if you want to talk to me,
Yeah.
I'd be happy to.
Sounds good. All right, cool. Quick thing on the plan for this semester. So last semester was a lot of content heavy, sort of like get to know the fundamentals of entrepreneurship. This semester is going to be much more hands-on, because all of you are at the idea stage point where you're putting sort of the rubber to the road and you're actually going to be building something. The other things we're going to add this semester, office hours, kind of TBD, sort of for anyone who has been like involved in entrepreneurship for like more than 1 year, can like email me to host like their office hours at a given time, and then like it would just be like I'll hang around here maybe on like Friday afternoons or something like that for 2 hours, and then you can just like feel free to swing by if you had quick questions on anything, and other people who do that. We'll have office hours. Funding, I'm going to work on getting launch-specific funding this semester, hopefully. If not, City has a bunch of rolling admission applications for funding, and we're going to make sure everyone here gets ideas funded that needs to get funded, because we absolutely can do that. And then we're going to have a demo day at the end of the semester. So pitch day was sort of the deliverable at the end of last semester, and then demo day is the deliverable at the end of this semester. The rationale behind these things is to try and get you comfortable in every single situation where you have to publicly present your venture. There are sort of a small number of ways where you have to know how to present. You need your big pitch events where you give a PowerPoint, it's a prepared speech, you give a Q&A. Like that's a common event. Then demo day is another really common sort of event, which is where you stand around maybe with a poster board to talk about your venture while people walk around. It's a different skill set to get. You have to be good at conversing and communicating very concisely and effectively. We'll talk about that. Then the other ones are like phone calls, which we'll also kind of do simulations on this summer of how to have an investor phone call. And then a new thing that I just kind of had this idea, I don't know how much is going to happen, but are going to be like deep dives into different like industries and stuff like that aren't going to happen during regular launch hours and be like entirely optional. But if folks wanted to come in and like discuss these different industries like social media, consumer products, services and consulting, tech websites and apps, finance, food, social venture capital, and potentially more, we'll have sort of like breakout sessions if you were interested in those. Other things, we have a lawyer, a startup lawyer is going to come in and speak at some point, and a professor who I'm really close with and have worked with is she's starting a social venture capital fund right now. So she's has been involved in a lot of startups, but she's also starting her own VC fund, and she'll come in and speak at some point too. Here are the tentative meeting plans. Here's kind of the like concrete skills that we're going to cover going forward. Branding and marketing can be really fun. We'll teach you some PR tricks to like get news about your startup and to like talk to reporters and things like that, get your names out there. We'll talk about pricing, which will be really fun. Fundraising, so like learning how to raise money from angel investors, venture capitalists, as well as grants and other ways of getting funding. We'll talk about that. Finances, sort of how to run your budgets. Law, legal stuff. By the way, no one's at a stage where they need legal stuff right now. I don't know if you all were thinking about incorporating or anything like that, but no one's at the stage to consider that. So don't waste money or time on doing that. Oh, like if you think you are, talk with me. And then tech stuff and how to manage people and delegate. And then the messy middle, which is sort of like everyone glorifies the start of a startup. You have your idea, it's amazing, it's really romantic, it's exciting, and then your success story happens, but there's this whole middle part that's actually the hardest part and the most important part. So we'll talk about like trudging it out, because you'll be hitting your messy middle around that time. And then demo days, how to present, and then we're gonna have demo day. That's kind of the plan. Any questions on the plan for this semester? Does anyone have any, also, if you have any suggestions ever for how to make it better, like, kind of just making this up on the fly. So if anyone wants to give advice for how to make it better, I'm always all ears. Yeah.
When we're talking about all the different aspects, are we actually doing them? Like the branding, marketing, PR?
Yes.
Okay.
So the way it's going to work, every meeting is going to start out with a round table, which we're about to do next. Then we're going to do quick like lesson on how to do this, and then the last part of the meeting is going to be you actually doing it for the startup. And I put these in order because I think that this is probably the order that everyone will have to do it. It should be kind of a one-size-fits-all template where it's applicable to everyone's venture. That's the idea about everything that's in class is kind of, or like in meeting is like kind of designed to be practical, like applicable to everyone, and then the breakout sessions are kind of like probably not applicable to everyone, but could be of interest. So all of these you are going to be working on your startup. We're going to do less kind of like abstract workshops and more concrete on your own startup workshops. Does that make sense? Any other things? Comments, questions, feedback, thoughts? Cool. Also, I got like one response to the launch feedback form, so if anyone has any feedback, that would be great, because my sample size is about this big right now. But anyway, I mean, it seemed okay, so it wasn't terrible. All right, so roundtables, which is going to be how we start all of our meetings. I'm trying to simulate a little bit what meetings should kind of be like with your startup. A lot of startups are implementing this meeting philosophy of having stand-up meetings. I don't know if anyone's heard of this, but having a morning stand-up, which is where you stand around with your team and you cover the following things. Here's what I've done, here's what I'm working on, and here are my roadblocks. The reason that you have this at the morning is to make sure everyone knows what they're going to be working on that day, the concrete deliverables, and you hold everyone mutually accountable so that if you say you're going to do something and you don't do it, you have to tell your teammates that I didn't do it, I'm sorry. And then the struggling with part is sort of on the roadblocks point of you want to bring up roadblocks early to your teammates so that they can address them. So for instance, like for me, my day-to-day is like I'll talk with our team and say, okay, like I do a lot of the marketing and finances side of things, so I'll be like, I'm working on these parts of our customer experience. Andre, who's the computer guy, I need you to build the following because that's the roadblock, and I'll like give him a list of things that I need, like tools that I need made. And then someone else, like Andre might say, oh, by the way, I need this email written, and that'll be his roadblock that I am supposed to address. Does that kind of make sense how collaboration kind of works? So we're trying to simulate that with the whole group. And the idea is that everyone here can give feedback that will be helpful to every venture. And the other point is, if you're not presenting and it's not your venture, it's really important to pay attention because you will learn so much from addressing another person's problem. It will probably be applicable to your venture in some way, shape, or form, but it'll also be applicable to the venture further down the road that you maybe haven't thought of. So it's really important to try and listen to everyone and try and add constructive feedback and things like that. The idea will eventually be to make a round table, but I decided that we probably couldn't make that today, but we'll do that later. So yeah, you start with one sentence, or whatever your team name is, name of your venture. If you don't have a name of a venture, don't worry about it. And we make whatever your value proposition is. So like, not like what you're building, like don't say, I'm building a platform for blank, say, I'm making the easiest, simplest way for people to get their laundry done, for instance, keep that example. And it's always important to remember everything goes back to the value proposition. And then so if everyone could get ready to give this for what you did over break. These are the to-dos that you accomplished over break, what you're working on, and what you're struggling with, or any roadblocks that you have. Trying to be as concise as possible so that everyone can go. Cool. And then you ask the last question. Who or what team wants to start? Just one person or one team will present at a time. You don't need everyone to go. Which team wants to kick us off? Cool. Awesome. Well, so what we're gonna do for the roundtables is like not everyone's gonna go every single week, but it's sort of like an idea, a way of like sharing your struggles with everyone else. Really quick before we all pack up or before folks leave, I do want to cover. I think this is really important. Also, I think that like this semester we keep the same hour 15, so like block off until 8:45 we get a deal. So a lot of you are at the stage where it's really important to get advisors because a lot of you are saying things like, I don't know what I should work on next, or I don't know like how to go about making this. This is the perfect opportunity to go talk to advisors. So like building your network is something that you should start right now for your startup. Startups are really made off of the successful network that you build. You use people to get like further advice. They're also great references and will go out of their way to help you with people. They'll get you into doors that you otherwise wouldn't get into. And this is like simple. You're not offering them anything in return. You're just asking people for advice and treating them really respectfully for it. But I can't stress how important that is. So what I'd recommend doing is creating a list of hopeful advisors from guaranteed to long shot. You already have everyone in this room as a guaranteed advisor. None of us are long shots. But then you should have long shots. And these are people who are CEOs of or founders of the ideal company that you want to be. Not necessarily your direct competitor, like they're probably not gonna take your call, but people who are like in a similar industry, you should definitely try to reach out to and ask them, like shoot high and just keep going, keep asking. We'll talk about exactly how to do that. Once you get in touch with people, then you keep them updated regularly. Like that's the best way to do it. So that means every single quarter, maybe like every three months or so, you send them a quick update if you haven't talked to them at all, like at least that much, because the worst thing to do to an investor is ask them a ton, get a ton of advice, disappear for a year, and then come back to them and have a big update to give them, and they're like, no, like, I just wanted to hear all the little incremental steps. That way you walk them through your thought process and you keep them along the way. Even if you aren't asking for advice at every single stage, it's really important to update them regularly. You can do this really simply by putting in your calendar at the end of every month, for instance, do I have any advisors to check in? Or do I have any mentors to check in? You can also do this for your personal self too. Like I know a lot of people might have mentors from high school and college and things like that that are just good, people to keep up with. And you should set a reminder so that you keep up with those people in the future. It's very easy. The other thing is it's a super small world. Entrepreneurship in general is a really small world. You realize this really soon. And reputations really matter. So you gotta treat every advisor like you're not just speaking with a single person. It's like you're speaking to an entire community. So really treat those relationships with respect. Treat everyone well. Don't burn bridges. It's totally okay to disagree with advisors, but don't burn bridges because folks do talk about it. The upside of that is if you build a really good reputation with a couple of advisors and then they talk about you and they're like, oh, if you talked with those folks at whatever, they're really wonderful. And then the other person talks to you and they're like, oh, they're really wonderful too. And then suddenly you build up this network, and then when an investor is like doing reference checks on you, which they will do, they'll look through their network and be like, hey, has so-and-so ever talked to you before? And if they give great response for you, then you're likely to get an investment. Like everyone reference checks these days, and it's way too easy to do, or it's really easy to do so. The other thing to do is know how everyone's interests and backgrounds affect their advice. So no one is the god of your field. No one can tell you the exact right thing to do. They can just give you advice on what their perspective has kind of given them, the insight that they've learned. So you need to take everything that someone says with a grain of salt. Like, don't think that someone's answer is always 100% right. And to do this properly, you need to really take into account where they come from and what their interests are. So if someone is a genuine advisor to you and is totally not interested in the success of your venture, then their interests might be pretty well aligned with you. But if you're talking with someone who is an investor, their interests are not your interests necessarily. They want a bigger chunk of your business. They want you to do certain things that give them a quicker exit. And you need to, not to say that you shouldn't get their advice, but you should just know what their interests are and why they might be giving that. Then on the other side is backgrounds are really important. So if someone started, for your political, for engaging young people in issues, someone who started, or for you as well, some big consulting company, political consulting company, is used to doing this at a large scale. They don't know what it's like to get your first General Assembly election, for instance, that you're covering. Or someone who started maybe a political ad firm that specializes in newspaper ads. You're gonna be scraping the internet for issues. They don't necessarily have the same background that you need. So they're gonna give you advice that might be reflecting of that. So take everything with a grain of salt. That doesn't mean that their advice is not valuable. And then take in a wide variety of your viewpoints. Really good advice is when a lot of people have told you a lot of different things and it's kind of pulling you in different directions, but you get your feet grounded and you take one direction, you all agree on it, you execute on that direction, and then you reevaluate and get all that feedback in. You can't make everyone happy all the time, and so don't try to follow everyone's advice. You're gonna get pulled in different directions. That's okay. The last thing that I wanted to talk about advising, or two more things, I guess. Fire and forget advising is something that Y Combinator talks about. This is a really nice thing with advising. So everyone's adults now. When someone tells you one thing to do, they only need to tell you it once. They should never have to tell you multiple times. So if you talk with an advisor and they say, go out and put your product in 20 people's hands and then come back to me. But you come back to them and they say, did you put your product in 20 people's hands? And you say, no, sorry, I forgot. That's really kind of disrespectful to their advice. And the nice part of advice is someone who knows that I can just give you one small recommendation and you're gonna do it. I can fire it and I can forget about it. I know that you're gonna actually execute on that. So you wanna get to that mentality of someone tells me something that is a really good piece of advice, I execute on it, and it's done. They don't have to remind me again. I'm not, I don't need hand-holding. That's a good thing to do. And then having this mindset all the time is a really respectful thing to do. Everyone's time is more valuable than yours. And I said send GCal invites just because that's a small piece of advice. It's the little things about how if someone says, oh, do you have time for a phone call on Thursday morning at 9 a.m.? And they say yes. Don't just say, great, talk then. Maybe go out of your way and say, awesome, I just sent you a calendar invite. My phone number is this. Give me a call then. Or something like that. That saves them one step, so on their phone they can just click accept and they're reminded to do it. But carry that mindset to everything that you do. So if someone says, if someone is running late, for instance, hang on to that time, wait for them to come around, their time is more valuable than yours. Keep that mentality all the time. Oh, and Give and Take is this great book, by the way, if you're looking for other things to read. Adam Grant is this legendary Wharton professor, and he wrote this book on networking. Really quick on it. People think of networking as quid pro quo, I do this favor for you and you do this favor for me. That's the wrong way to think about it. You really should always look to give. And everyone has something to give to someone else. So that's doing someone a nice favor, sending someone their way. The best way to strengthen networks is to do things for people without asking for anything in return. People will pay it back. The research shows that people pay it back way more than you could have ever asked for. So for instance, a way to do this is if you're talking to a professor at Yale who is interested, who knows something about your field, and you talk to them, you say, thanks so much for your time, and then 2 weeks later you're reading something interesting that reminded you of them, send them that article. Just be just thought of you, this article is a fantastic read, hope you enjoy. That's a nice thing that you did for them. It shows that you're engaging with them. It's a nice, simple way to do it. Another great thing to do is if you work with anyone or get advice from someone and then you refer someone else to them, it's a big compliment to pay them. And it's a really nice thing to do to keep the pipeline going. So look for like little ways to do favors for people. When we talk about press and you talk with reporters, the best way to keep a reporter happy is to keep giving them scoops that aren't about you. So whenever I interact with a cool, like, interesting startup and like I'm talking with them, and I have like this network of reporters that I know, I'll send the reporter an email, be like, hey, just talk to the founder of so-and-so, they're CC'd. If you wanna talk with them, they have a really interesting story about X. That reporter then knows, oh, Bennett is a useful source, I wanna keep him happy. Like, next time that he has big news, I wanna write about it. Does that make sense? So like you can kind of build those networks. Any questions on networking and advising? I just want to quick run through that. Okay. Meetings and agendas. Always have an agenda for every meeting, especially when people are outside of your team and you're having a meeting with an advisor. Have specific things. Send them an email of like, I'd love to ask you about this, this, and this. And then when they get on the phone call with you, jump right in. Take the lead. Ask the questions. Don't let them do the first talking. Don't make it awkward. And at the minimum, you want to know what you're going to leave this table with, what you're going to leave the room with. And then send a recap email to your team with to-dos. The worst thing is to have repeat meetings. What I mean by that is like, you have a meeting once, you all agree on what to do, you all leave, you forget what you were supposed to do, you come back, you have another meeting, you agree again on the same things to do, and you leave, and you repeat that process. Worst thing to do, send a recap email, make sure everyone's on the same page. Thank them for their time. And then a cool thing, the reason Jeff Bezos is up here, is because Amazon has an interesting meeting culture, which you can look into. You can design your own nice meeting culture. He says you should never have a meeting with more people than 2 pizzas can feed, which keeps the rooms small and things like that and avoids the meetings where no one is engaged with. We violate that one every single week, unfortunately. And then 6-page memos, everyone starts the meeting by reading someone else's 6-page memo, and they don't know who wrote that 6-page memo. It's always addressed to the team, by the team. And everyone has the first 20 minutes of the meeting to read all 6 pages. That's because no one does the reading beforehand, like everyone knows here in seminars. And so when you show up, you read it first, and then that's why the study hall point is there. They don't do PowerPoints there. That's another rule that we violate from Amazon, but I thought that was interesting and valuable. Last thing on emails. This is something that's really important to practice, especially with advisors. Emails are not like any other writing that you do for any other academic class. So throw out all of that nonsense about having an introductory paragraph and having a thesis statement and having body paragraphs and all that stuff. That's not how you write emails. It's not how you communicate with people professionally. You should try and communicate as much as you possibly can with the subject line. If you just have a question for them, write the question in the subject line. Don't write name of venture, for instance. Like, that's vague and unhelpful to whoever's reading your email. If you're asking for advice, say, young Yale team trying to start company wants advice, something like that, so that they know exactly what they're opening when they get it. And then the first sentence should have the deliverable. What I mean by that is the first sentence of every email should be what the person responds with. Don't hide your questions in the email, keep it up front. Say like, hi, I'm so-and-so, and I'd love to chat with you at some point, or like at some point next week, for instance. Like, I'm starting a company, I'd love to talk with you sometime next week. Then give more about your company, and then follow up the question and have a great week, for instance, and then sign off. Don't hide that order, just because these are busy people you're gonna be contacting, they need to know what you're talking about. One phone screen limit. You should always be able to read the entirety of your email in like 95% of situations on one phone screen without scrolling. So don't write anything that's like longer than that, particularly when it's to someone external from your team. And then the other thing that's kind of helpful is schedule time with your day to respond to emails. So like, a lot of people will let your email inbox like drive your to-do list. When you get a lot of emails, like you'll just keep responding to emails all day and like you'll feel like you've never done anything. So block out like 30 minutes in the morning, 30 minutes like after lunch, and 30 minutes in the evening to respond to your emails, and then just set aside that time, leave it for later, and then do it all then. Don't leave anyone hanging. What I mean by that, it's fine if random opportunities are left hanging, but don't leave key advisors waiting. Like, don't say, hey, what times this week are you available to meet? And they say 9 a.m. on Thursday, and Wednesday night at 11 p.m. you email, great, talk to me then. That's not helpful. Like, you should email them as quickly as you can for advisors and things like that. Cool. Okay, that was all that I had content-wise. Does anyone have any questions on these things? Yeah.
I don't know if we're going to listen to like those slides, but if you're thinking about developing like surveys and like customer-based surveys for your product, like what's the stage at which you do that in relation to like
I think before, always. It's like, you want to know what